Good day, everyone. It's Carpo. I believe it's November 1st, if I'm not mistaken. So, sorry, December 1st. Wait, yeah, December 1st. Anyway, it doesn't really matter what day it is. It's pretty irrelevant in the digital realm, unless you have a news show or something. But many of the things I talk about are more or less timeless, so in this particular instance, there's no exception. In today's video, I'd like to talk about existential issues with finding purpose in life and embracing your creativity. I've attempted to make videos like this before, and I end up with armloads of papers and notes, and then I just put them away and I say, this is just too much. This is something I need to write about or write a book, but my motivation or inspiration to share these videos and to write and to take notes and write journals and document my findings and to learn and educate myself, that's my passion. I've always been a person who liked to learn, but it wasn't until recent years that I realized this is my passion and I have to embrace it. I am the kind of person who tends to go from thing to thing, and I'm like, this is interesting, oh, this is interesting. The only thing that has remained consistent through the years, and namely on YouTube here, is my willingness to make videos and to talk about these subjects. So this ties into some of the things I was looking at this morning before I made this video. I was watching a couple of videos. I've probably already seen them before. Once one video comes on, you know, then it just auto plays, and so I'm listening to several different ones about Nietzsche. And I'd like to start off with discussing Friedrich Nietzsche. And I think honestly, I think that one of the most pathetic things about talking about Nietzsche is that somebody always complains about how people pronounce his name. People call him Nietzsche or Nietzsche. It doesn't matter. It seems like the ideas, if you can't get to the ideas without obsessing over how the name is pronounced, then it's just you're kind of missing the message. But anyhow, there's bigger problems, right? I understand semantics, language, all these different things, but the one thing that he spoke about that I think is the most crucial to talk about is herd mentality, or herd morality, rather. And this is the idea that if a lot of people feel a certain way, then it must be the right way to feel. And I'm going to try to simplify this because you could talk about these ideas for hours, and I know I would. You have what you would call the rich. They considered themselves to, I should say, not the rich, but the kings, and you know, families would have divine bloodlines. The belief in ancient times, up until recent times, and still in many places today, is that God put whoever's in power into power. That if a man has more skills than another person, or he has more power than another person, then he was favored by God, and therefore a better person, a better man, the man for the job, if you will. Now we know this isn't true, but through history we've dealt the best we can with the information provided that we had. So, as the poor, the slave morality is also what it's called. This is what brought about ideas like the meek shall inherit the earth, or the idea that being humble and being passive and just living a modest, you know, regular life is living the closest you can to the truth of what a human should be, and that you will be favored in the afterlife for that. And there was a time in my life where I almost believed that. In fact, even on YouTube I mentioned a couple times that, you know, years ago, that in my opinion at that time life was about just living a modest, mild life and just enjoying it as best you can and not harming anyone. Well, I came to find that I do not believe that any longer. One of the reason that I brought up Nietzsche, you know, to this situation in this particular discussion is because he spoke a lot about finding values through experience, not through authority. See, we seem to give up our power to other people. We want others to tell us where we should be and what we should be doing, where we should be going. And this is natural it's a natural tendency for mankind to want to have somebody help us out and lead the way for us. But he had this idea of the Übermensch, which is the Superman, and that was the idea that any man could become a Superman, and of course a woman too, through embracing the strengths that we have and through following our passions. Often people will use morality to justify evil. They will say, well, this is the right thing to do because my book says it, or my leaders say it. And I think that that's why Nietzsche is misquoted so many times and misunderstood. The idea that he says, people say, well, he just says that morality doesn't matter and that there is no morality and that it's all subjective. Yeah, he did. But the message that is missed is, it's not about abandoning morality for the sake of self-gratification, but rather finding morality through your own experiences, not through what you're told is right and wrong. To live and experience your own life, and to see why it's important to be honest, to see why it's important to not harm other people. These seem obvious, and to the point where they were put down as commandments, as if they were divinity, but they're not. There are no 10 commandments, and there is no moral authority that tells us how to live, and this is why people created religions, to try to consolidate this, to try to understand it better, and to take the messages that they had within their psyche and say, how do we put this down so other people don't go through the same trials and tribulations as we do? But religion's a totally different story. It's like a tool that can be used for understanding, or a tool that can be used to, a weapon that can be used to divide and conquer. Using the idea of morality, we can see why it's dangerous. Because morality is used to justify nationalism. It's used to, say that one man is better than another man and that he has more rights than another person. Here's the thing, what it comes down to is every person is born into this world and should be treated with equal rights. But equal rights does not mean equal skill or equal value. And that's something that if you say, well, some men are worthless, people would say, you're an asshole. How could you possibly say that? You know, that's insulting and demeaning, and everybody has a purpose on earth, and everybody has some mission to fulfill in a life path, and kind of like the, everyone is needed kind of thing. And I did believe that at one time as well. But I know better now. So by saying that, I'm opening myself up to, to someone pointing the finger at me and saying, how dare you say that some men are worth less? But my answer to that would be, how can you say that any man or woman is worth more if you can't say that some are worth less? In other words, we talk about great men and women all the time that have done wonderful things. But it seems that we're not supposed to judge, judgment. Don't judge those who have done bad, unless, of course, it's extreme. But anyhow, one of the things that we have to do in order to find out what our life's passion is, whatever it might be, is to test living methods. And that means you cannot just sit and meditate and think about where you want to be. You get an idea in your head, let's say this, you get an idea in your head and it's a passion, and you think, well, it's not a passion yet, but it's something that really moves you. You think, I want to do this so bad, I want to paint an art piece or write a book. And I know that feeling because I have it. I've been trying to write a couple books for a while here. Anyone can have a passion in their mind. Putting it down and actually doing something with it, taking action on it, is a longer process. And we don't have to jump right into things. Like a lot of what I've learned is based around my experience. And so it's, if I get an idea, then I think on it for a few days. And I do this with videos too. Instead of just jumping right in front of the camera, I'll think about it, for throughout the day. And then all of a sudden everything will fall into place. We have to give ourselves time to process these things. It's very difficult to try to live a purposeful, creative, fulfilling life in today's world when we're told that the best we can do is go to work from 9 to 5, come home and watch TV and go to bed. We know that's not true, and we're not really told that, but that seems to be the premise upon which we consider that to be something that we shouldn't do. In other words, that's what the TV, the idiot box, we've always cursed ourselves for our own tools that we abuse. And so I'd like to say for a minute, and these are kind of scattered thoughts, I have this, there was a quote, I think, by Nietzsche that talked about how if you, basically it's like this, and I've experienced this a lot. If you are a philosopher or a thinker, If you propose an idea to someone who is not prepared to understand that idea, then they're going to think that you're a hateful, vengeful, mean, or, ignorant person. No better is this the case than with Nietzsche himself, because he was misquoted and misunderstood so many times. People think that he's a nihilist and that he hates the world and that he just figures, oh well, life's worthless, there's no morals, just do what thou will and die. It's complete nonsense. He was a deep thinker with a deep understanding of these things, along with many other philosophers of the time, before and after. But it brings me, when he talked about that, he said that if if the person's not aware of all the details encompassing that idea and how you reach that conclusion, then by making a statement, somebody can think that you're vulgar. That has happened when you say kind of like tough shit, or example, don't be a victim, or pull up your bootstraps. People are like, no, it's more complicated than that. It's like, no, but you've got to understand the underlying mechanism, of where that comes from. But it reminds me of the old biblical quote that people often mention. It says, where Jesus supposedly says, for those who have eyes to see and ears to hear. That metaphor, it wasn't meant to say only those who are faithful will hear God or understand the message. It had nothing to do with religion. It had everything to do with, you have to be wise and you have to be experienced in order to really understand the depth of it. And the more aware you become of how things operate and what you think is, I guess a correct way, not necessarily right and wrong, the more separated you become from your fellow man in some ways. So we have to kind of reel ourselves back in and say, look, we're doing this for humanity, not just for ourselves. And that's another, point I wanted to make. If a person uses their wisdom and their awareness to fulfill their passions, even if making money is their passion, whatever it might be, it's open season on anything for what a person wants to do. Nothing is good or bad. It's about how we utilize these funds. For example, if a person was to get rich off of their passion, it's more about, I think, understanding the myths and the legends is one of the best keys to understanding some of the philosophical insights. Understanding the hero's journey. If you've never read any Joseph Campbell, I urge you highly to read Joseph Campbell's work about myths and legends and heroes and the hero's journey. If you want to get a little bit more of just kind of a wisecrack, then we go to like Alan Watts. He's like one of my heroes. Why? Because he said things that basically made no sense to most of the people, but it was just for fun. Not no sense, but rather it was Zen-like discussions, which didn't try to answer any specific questions, but rather opened up the door to say, does it matter? Life is about playing, it's about creativity. Our whole society has been told creativity is a waste of time, that art is something you do in your spare time, or that artists are these people outside of the normal society that just provide these things for us to look at. When all of us inside have this yearning passion to be artists. And before somebody says, I don't have any artistic talents, I think it was Kierkegaard that said, I'm not sure if it was Kierkegaard, I can't recall, but he, one of the earlier philosophers, or later philosophers, said, what was it? I guess it doesn't matter. Shit, I hate it when I forget something. Anyhow, it doesn't matter. Move on to the next thing. One of the problems that we have is worshiping our own state and nationalism rather than our own ideas, and this is one of the traps that we get into when we start believing in this herd mentality, not just herd morality, but herd mentality, follow the leader. And if you dare to speak out against the whole, then people expect you to take a side. How many people stand in the middle of a battlefield and point at the two sides and try to be a referee for it? You either pick a side or you die, and that's the mentality people seem to have. Standing on the sidelines it takes a little bit more effort, because you want to understand where all these ideas come from. You want to understand why people feel the way they do. Like someone said that, well, that doesn't matter. Nietzsche talked about the strength of will, and then the will to power. And at first it's the strength to have this will, and then the will to have power, but it's not for power's sake. It's not for dominating. It's not for being better or greater than anyone else. It's for our own personal satisfaction. Sometimes when others see that from the outside, they see those who are trying to do great things as a threat to their simple-mindedness, if you will, because some people don't like complex ideas. It makes anyone else the enemy. Anyone who's trying to improve society becomes the enemy. Anyone who's trying to stand out from the crowd becomes the enemy. And I've experienced this tons of times when I've been attacked on YouTube because people will actually, insult and call me names merely because I have subscribers that watch the channel. As if you have people watching you, then somehow, you're a threat. It's hard to describe, but I see this all the time in politics, in the media, and a band is some underground band that's loved, and then they become popular and nobody likes them anymore. There's all of a sudden something's now it's about the money, or now it's about the personal gain. Innate talent means nothing. The idea that we're born with these talents. They say that some people do have and this is regarding pursuing passions in life. It is true that some people initially are better at something than others, but through practice they found almost no difference in a person who's fully experienced. For example, if you play a couple games of chess, then you might get lucky, and your mind might, the first few times you play, maybe you'll beat somebody who's been playing chess a long time. Then eventually, you get the beginner's luck fades off. Well, if a person who starts off really good at something and another person who just sucks when they start, if they both work for years on end, there's really very little difference between the status of their, the quality of their play and their knowledge on the subject later. It's just a matter of pursuing it. And so what I'm saying is, for anybody who has no skills right now, it doesn't matter. You can still pursue that. I have a hard time pursuing my skills because I haven't found them yet, and I'm still trying to figure this out. I've been trying to find my niche in this world, and meanwhile I've been ignoring the niche that I've been filling, which is talking about things, philosophy, ideas. It's almost like I look down on myself and have a little bit of self-criticism because of that, So here's just a few rules I want to finalize. This video got too long already. Just a few notes that I took that I think will help people live, hopefully, a little more fulfilling. One is to choose a life path and find your calling. This is something that I used to think you kind of wait for it to fall into your lap. It's not that it's a divinely handed down to you, maybe it is, but when you feel something and it moves you, and you know that feeling, then go for it. But you can only know it if you try it. So the idea is to try out a lot of different life paths. And in other words, try out different ideas, try different jobs, try different hobbies, try everything until something clicks with you, and you might just find your passion. Another thing is delusion may be necessary, and this is a hard one. And we may have to delude and fool ourselves and think that we're better. In fact, anybody who's ever become good at anything had to delude themselves to start, because nobody starts a professional. You have to pretend like you're the person you want to be. And that goes down to mindset and putting your mind in where you want to be and visualizing, and all these things tie together in their own way. Another one is be honest in your actions and dealings. That's something that, regardless of what philosophy or ideals you follow, we all know that lying, cheating, stealing, and dishonesty is something that hurts us inside more than we could ever possibly gain. Another one is don't conform just for safety. Meaning, don't just follow the group because everybody else is doing it. Always think everything through for what it is, as an individual. It's easy to slip into just that, the follower mentality, but it's a lot harder to think crucially about each subject, on its own. Question authority, always. Just because a person's an expert on something, or a person's a politician, doesn't mean that you have to trust what they're saying is true. I think that one kind of goes without saying. Another one is expect more of ourselves. Demand more of ourselves. And it's one of the hardest for me, because it's easy to be content. But there's always that fire burning inside of us, at least some of us. And I have to, I don't want to douse the fire, I want to feed that fire, and make something out of it. There's two different types. There's passive satisfaction and active satisfaction. Now this is an interesting point here. Yeah, passive satisfaction is like you're feeling bored, so you take a bong hit, or drink a few beers, or do something that's quickly entertaining, watch watch a show or something to drown your mind. And the other one is active satisfaction, which would be like taking the time to actually create something. Active satisfaction has a much longer shelf life. If you create something, you're going to be able to think back to that many times. You're going to be able to maybe see what you created. But if you're just filling the time and filling the void, it's easy for the days to just click by, and you have nothing to show for it, in a sense. And that can be even more difficult, because then we get wrapped up in our self-pity and say, oh, I haven't done anything, and we've got to conquer that. Got to get out of that too. The last one is to create something. And I knew the one thing I forgot in this video, of course I knew it would come to my mind at the end, because this deals with that. And whichever philosopher it was, he says, create something, do something magnificent in life, you know, create art, draw, write a book, whatever it might be. If you can't find any passions, you can always create yourself. And that's one of the most difficult art pieces to master, but we always have ourselves to work on. We can always improve our own attributes. And it seems, I don't know, it's very difficult to, it's one thing to say this is a good way to analyze life and to embrace and live your life. It's another thing to see it applied to each individual separately and how it doesn't work for everyone the same. And this is why we don't tell others what they should do with their life, but rather feel what's in your heart, feel that burning, that yearning, and make something from it. And, you know, it's easier said than done. I'm sitting here telling you these things because I would like to have more passion. I would like to say, I have the passion, I would like to have more drive to fulfill it. But I become afraid of which way to turn. And that's one of the most crucial things I've learned is they say, you know, most of these old-time philosophers agree, we're all going to be stuck with the paradox of choice. That's why you have to pick one and go. The worst that can happen is you don't like it later and you change. And amidst all this, when we think this is too hard, or this is going to take too long, or man, things could be so much better, most of the great thinkers have always just thought about death at that point. Because when you think about death, it's the ultimate end to your earthly problems, and really that's the final say. So until then, work your ass off, you know, do what you can. There's going to be periods of stagnance, periods of growth, periods of change, periods of boredom, but, you know, the best we can do is just try to remember to yearn for something greater, always, and to share that with others. So, talk to y'all later. Have a good one.